Hey guys, it's Brit here today, and today we're going to be doing hand sewing basics just because I don't want to get into sewing with a sewing machine until we learn the basics of sewing. So today I will be having, for this video, we're going to be having scrap pieces of material, needle and thread, which I have cutters. You can use thread cutters. They aren't that necessary if you're beginning out sewing in your career, just because of the fact that I know these type of tools and utensils can get expensive. So without further ado, let's get right over to this voiceover. So I just want to first start off by saying sewing is not a simple task, especially if you're sewing by hand. So if you guys are struggling, it's okay. You will get it going down the line. It just takes practice. I definitely am not perfect with sewing by hand. So here I am just threading the needle, which is very time consuming. So once you have the thread through, you want to make sure there's double-sided just to add extra strength to that stitch. And you're going to take your thread and loop it around your fingers and pull the thread through the loop to make a tied knot at the end of the thread. All right, and this is just a second method in which you can thread your needle. So this is called a needle threader. You put the wire of the needle threader through the hole of the needle, and then you pull the thread through the thread wire, and then you go ahead and pull the needle upward to pull the thread into the needle hole. And also, I just want to say that this needle threader also has a thread cutter on it, so you can cut any excess thread off. If you look very closely in the video, if you need to pause it, go ahead and do so. Alright, and then just to tie it off, it's still the same steps as before. Just loop it through your finger, then pull the thread through the loop. So here I'm just showing you a bar of soap, which helps to strengthen the thread so that way it does not break off while you're sewing. If you don't have thread wax, I would recommend using a bar of soap just to add a little strength to your thread. And here I'm just showing you the right side of the fabric and the wrong side. The first part is the right side of the fabric, which you do not want to start your sewing. You want to sew on the back side, which is the underside of the fabric. I'll make another video explaining how you can tell the difference between the right side and the wrong side in this Sew It Begins series. Alright, and the first stitch is a running stitch or gathered stitch if you want to gather up the material. So with the running stitch, it is basically just a straight stitch that you use when you're pulling the needle in and out of the fabric, which can also help with gatherings. Once you're done sewing that specific stitch, all you do is pull the needle in the thread gently so that way you don't break the thread or the needle possibly. You pull it and it will gather the fabric so that way you can gather up the fabric and make ruffles. You'll see once you get to that part of the video.
Like the cool blue light. Like the cool blue light. Like the cool blue light.
Alright, so here I'm gathering the material. I just want to point out that my stitches aren't perfect. I just wanted to show you guys how you would stitch the stitches. Of course, if I'm actually going to put together a garment, I will definitely take my time and thorough out and make sure that my stitches are somewhat very in the neatest form possible, just so that way my seams come out seamless. All right, and then next stitch that I'm showing you guys here is called a back stitch. It's almost like a runner stitch, but what you do is you first start off pulling the thread in the needle through the wrong side of the fabric to start off the stitch, and then you pull the needle into the fabric, and once you have it started the stitch, you go back to the end of that stitch and bring the needle toward the front of the stitch, if that makes sense. If you don't quite understand, you can go ahead and just rewind it back and kind of watch how I'm doing it. Pull the needle through. And here, as you can see, my thread kept getting caught on the fabric, only because I would start it in the middle just so you guys can see what I was doing. But here I'm just going to show you how to tie off your thread. So I like to double stitch one more time, so that way I know that the thread will not come out of the garment. So once you've stitched over your last stitch, go ahead and flip the material over, pull the needle through the stitch and make a loop, and pull the needle through that loop. You can go ahead and do this as many times as you would like, just for insurance that your thread will not come loose. I do this typically 1 to 3 times, just so I know for my sake that the thread will not come loose. And it's a very effective method. You can go ahead and trim off any excess thread once you're done tying off your knot. I did struggle a lot with this stitch. This is called the blanket stitch. This stitch here is for reinforcing any frayed edges, so it helps to prevent any of your seams from fraying further. So if you have any raw edges, I would definitely go ahead and use this blanket stitch to cover up any of those frayed edges. And if I did not mention earlier before starting a blanket stitch, back stitching is probably the most prominent stitch you want to use, definitely if you're sewing something, because it reinforces the garment. It's a very strong stitch method, so I would definitely recommend using the back stitch if you're going to be making a garment by hand, just so that way you can reassure yourself that that garment will not come unthreaded. So definitely go ahead and use that back stitch if you're going to be piecing together a garment by hand. So that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching my first video for my series. So it begins. Please give this video a like, subscribe, and share if you really enjoyed this video, or you know someone who would definitely enjoy sewing and learning how to sew to become a seamstress. Thank you. Bye.